Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be breaking down the tactics, or perhaps the lack of tactics, against Celta Vigo yesterday in the friendly. I'm going to be speaking a bit about the players' roles, things that I noticed from being at the game, and things that I think Wolves definitely need to work on going into the Manchester City game. So let's get straight into this one. Here is the starting lineup from the first half, and it was just a very sort of flat first half really for both teams really. Celta Vigo looked a bit more threatening, don't get me wrong, but it was extremely flat in the first half, and there's a few things that I want to speak about from that half really. So initially I thought Wolves were relatively poor on the ball, and I was very surprised about the sort of lacklustre wayward passes. Now, for me, as I've said on this channel, I like Kiana Herver. I always have liked Kiana Herver, but yeah, I think I can, safely say that he can't be Wolves' wing back going into next season for me. As much as I've tried to defend him, as much as I've, want him to succeed at Wolves, I just don't think he can be Wolves' starting right wing back going into the Premier League season, unless there was something drastic to change and he was absolutely unbelievable against Manchester City. Now, for me, in the first half, I think it was relatively poor. I think there was a hell of a lot of sort of Jose Sarr just getting the ball, just picking up the ball. As soon as he gets the ball, knocks it long to Larson. Larson loses the flick on. Celta Vigo regain possession. It was really just a lot of that, and it was a lot of that throughout the game, to be honest. So I want to just sort of break that down a bit. Now, in terms of going into the Premier League, it's just not going to work. Playing that type of football is just not going to work going into next season. Against the lesser quality sides, it may look okay, but even then, Celta Vigo aren't an unbelievable side. And every time it happened, it just, ended up back with the keeper or back with one of their centre-backs or Mingueza at left-back. So, generally, I just thought it was such a poor showing, really. Now, a lot of people have been saying that Sarr had a good game, and for me, I don't think he can do anything about the goal. I want to make that abundantly clear. But when I look at Jose Sarr, I'm not just looking at him, saving shots. I was looking at his distribution, and it was always, and has always, pretty much been off. I just thought, at times, he would just lump it up to Larson. Sometimes he'd lump it out to Herver and get it in this area, and it'd miss both Lopez and Herver. Sometimes he'd pass it to Agbadou when Agbadou's got two men on him in this area. And generally, I just thought his distribution was really poor yesterday, and it has been for a long time, and obviously that's part of the reason why I think he will be replaced ultimately at some point. But, as I say, shot stopping, he wasn't too bad. There was an error between him and Totti as well, during the game as well, which I think he actually saved Totti a bit, but equally the communication wasn't that great from the both of them. But generally in the first half, there was a hell of a lot of long ball, and again, it's just not something that works in the modern day. It just isn't. If you were playing 2010 Stoke City, it might work. Do you know what I mean? But it just doesn't work in the modern game, really. Now, another thing that I massively took from the first half for me, and generally throughout the game, I'd probably, I will discuss him throughout the game in this, really, I think, is this man here, Agbadou. Now, for me, I was really concerned, and I have been concerned throughout pre-season. I'm not saying that he's a bad footballer. I'm not saying he's a bad defender whatsoever. But for me, in pre-season, he just looks like he's just not trying. And I don't know if that's an effortless thing and he wants to look like he's being effortless. But generally, he's been caught on the ball so many times. His passes were wayward. He did a really nice switch, actually, out to the right when Rodrigo Gomez was on the right in the second half. But generally, I thought his passing was poor. He didn't really break the lines of his passing either, which he did a hell of a lot last season. It just very much felt like he was just sort of trying to get it forward as quick as possible, when ultimately against a side like Celta Vigo, that just isn't the best plan. The best plan is to try and retain possession and work and fashion a chance. Because ultimately, once Celta Vigo get the ball back, again, it's a Spanish side. They're going to get on the ball. They want to keep the ball. They want to have possession. They want to keep the ball ticking, keep the ball moving, and make Wolves work ultimately. And that's what I think they did really well throughout the game. I think they kept the ball relatively well. Joao Gomez had a few nice touches, I think, and he, a few nice interceptions. But generally, again, I'm just quite concerned about Agbadou. I hope that it is just a pre-season thing, that he's playing a bit laboured and a bit slower and a bit sort of, off the pace. I hope that is the case, because going into next season, he was one of my dead certs for, to have a really good season. I thought he'd go on to another level this season, but pre-season has concerned me. Now, I want to speak about Totti as well, because for me, I don't think Totti's devoid of blame yesterday. I don't think he was very good whatsoever. He did a few nice touches, but ultimately his link-up was poor. I thought when Bueno came on in the second half, he linked up with him pretty poorly as well. Gave Bueno not a lot to work with. For example, he'd give Bueno the ball and then try and overlap him from left centre-back, and Bueno's got no options. He's closed down by two players, and the attack pretty much dies. And that very much felt like that all afternoon, really. Even when Wolfer was there, I didn't think Totti was particularly great. But the one thing I want to speak about in the first half mainly is Keanu Herver. Now, this is going to be, I'm aware this is going to be a pretty interesting talking point. As I've said, he's nowhere near good enough. But often, you would see Keanu Herver in these areas very, very advanced. I mean, actually, you'd probably see him closer to this area because Fer Lopez would often drop in there, and he would often be higher than Fer Lopez. The only player he wouldn't be higher than really was Strand Larsen throughout the 90 minutes. Well, he was obviously only on for a few of those minutes, but in terms of his positioning, it was very much like this. And Keanu Herver, the biggest issue for me is that he wasn't found enough. Now, I think Andre made a lovely switch out to here, which allowed him to get into the area, and he sort of bombed on then. He sort of got into that area and made a chance. But generally, Herver's positioning was so high, which is great for wing backs. You want them high, and Herver is one of them players that wants to get in the box, and often you see him next to Strand Larsen for attacks. But my issue was going the other way. Going the other way was a massive concern for me. He was very rarely in that area, to be honest. He was very rarely up and down the line, which, as we all know, as a wing-back, it's pretty much this all game. Pretty much that all game. And he just wasn't anywhere near it in terms of doing that. Now, Herver, for me, I actually don't think he was that bad yesterday. In terms of overall pre-season, I don't think he's been great. But in terms of yesterday, I just think it's one of them with Keanu Herver that he's never going to be good enough to start for Wolves, in my personal opinion. I think he might go on to have a great career, maybe abroad, but I don't think he's going to be good enough to start for Wolves in the Premier League. And for me, the concerns with him was that lack of defensive ability. Now, I want to highlight this man, the Doc. I thought he was by far the best defender on the pitch yesterday. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. The amount of attacks he cut out, and there was a chance when the ball was looped over Sarr, he was here and essentially just did pretty much a miracle of a clearance, to be honest. It was brilliant, but Matt Doherty, for me, I thought he was absolutely exemplary yesterday, and one of the few players that I would say was really good. For me, him and Lopez were by far the best performers for Wolves on the day, and generally I thought he played really well. But again, he had to cover so much space. He really did have to cover so much space around here because Keanu Herver was just nowhere near him. Absolutely nowhere near him. Especially when they picked up the ball on that left-hand side. He was just miles off it. And I just think, Matt Doherty for me, as much as he's not the most inspiring player to go into the season with as your right-sided centre-back because Mosquera is injured and sort of can't play a full 90 anywhere near it at the minute, I think he's the least of Wolves' concerns, to be quite honest with you. Especially yesterday, I thought he was really, really good. Now, as I said with Keanu Herver, he leaves far too much space and doesn't really want to do the defending, which surprised me because at Stoke he was very much all action. At PSV he wasn't too great, but then at Auxerre again very much all action. So it's a weird one with Keanu Herver, but for me I did think he was miles off the pace yesterday. And then Wolfer, I can't speak about him too much really. I feel quite sorry for him. Obviously he got that little knock. It looked like it was his head, I think. And generally he had a few nice touches in the first half, didn't do a hell of a lot, didn't really have to do a hell of a lot down his side in that half either, really. But generally, I didn't think he did a hell of a lot. But one thing that did interest me with Wolfer was his positioning. As I said in previous videos, he was up here. He was, again, pretty much higher than Arias, and Arias was obviously coming in and cutting inside, as I said he would do in previous videos as well, because he is that inside forward player that wants to get in the box. But yeah, Wolfer's really high positioning, and they both were. Herver and Wolfer were just completely, extremely high, which obviously leaves Wolves massively exposed when they've only got a 2 in midfield and the 3 at the back, with all of this space that Celta Vigo could exploit in both of these areas. I thought Celta Vigo did that really well. I also think in transition in these areas, Aspas dealt with Agbadou really well. He sort of, especially in that first half, not so much in the second, but I think he held the ball up really well. I think he laid it off to the wide men really well, and generally was quite comfortable in possession. So that was another thing that I was quite concerned about as well. But, as I say, they were both very high up, Wolfer and Herver, and I was quite impressed with his positioning, and I would like to see him higher up the pitch because he is an all-action fullback, especially in the final third, so I would like to see that going forward. And then, as I've said, Andre and Joao Gomez. Now, these two come as a pair, don't they? They go over here as a pair. They end up coming together as a pair. Joao Gomez can go here and Andre can sit just behind him. Generally, though, for me, I don't think Andre was at his perennial best, particularly either. I don't think he was bad by any means. I'm not saying that, but I just don't think he was at his perennial best. I don't think he has been that really unbelievable all season. Joao Gomez for me again. I don't think he was at anywhere near his best either, but he's been Wolves' best performer in pre-season in my personal opinion. So I'm not going to get on to Joao Gomez. Trust me, he is the least of Wolves' concerns. I thought he was still relatively decent yesterday. Won the ball back in that first half a fair amount of times, and then, as I've said, Fer Lopez. He is truly, truly brilliant to watch. Now, as I've said, my biggest critique with Fer Lopez before he came to Wolves was his work rate, or perhaps lack thereof. He felt a bit more, a bit like Pablo Sarabia in a way, sort of technically brilliant, but the work rate just perhaps wasn't there, and he couldn't get about very quickly. But for me, Lopez yesterday, I thought he worked his absolute socks off, and that might be because it was Celta Vigo he was playing against. But generally, I thought his work rate was brilliant. On the ball, he had some lovely touches. And he just looks a really composed player. And there was a chance where Jean Arias got it, and Fer Lopez almost, drifted inside. Jean Arias picked up this space, cuts inside, takes a shot on goal, but ultimately, he probably should have scored it in my opinion. But yeah, it was one of them. But generally for me, Fer Lopez, I thought he was absolutely exemplary yesterday, and probably Wolves' best performer on the day, as I said, along with Matt Doherty. I thought he was really, really good. And I do, really want to see a lot more of him this season. I'm really excited by the prospect of him playing for Wolves, to be quite honest. And then let's just touch on John Arias quickly, because for me, again, it was a weird one. He's one of them players that his passing was just miles off. His radar was just miles off. And he was over-hitting things, under-hitting things, making the wrong decision in final third. But ultimately, again, for me, John Arias, I don't think he'll be one of the worries, because ultimately, again, even in that sort of game that he struggled in, he was still getting chances, still trying to make things happen. He had some lovely touches again. There's a time when he has three players around him, gets the ball out comfortably, and he's got really quick feet, really, really, exciting player. So, again, not too concerned about John Arias. And then for me, as I was saying in the week, I don't like when people get onto Jürgen Strand-Larsen. However, he was just winning nothing yesterday. Every long ball, as I've said, I think it was critique from Sarr, because Sarr's long passing is nowhere near good enough anyway. But every long ball, he was nowhere near it really. He didn't bring the ball down enough. His link-up play wasn't good enough with the wide men, or particularly the midfielders, to bring them into play either. And generally, he created little to nothing for himself, which is a shame, because I love Jürgen Strand-Larsen, but he's one of these players that you have to create for him, because he's never going to create for himself. Because of his frame, his size, and his style of play, he has to be facilitated by people, which is why Marshall Monetzi worked so well last season. Having that player next to him allowed him to flourish. But for me, I think he really struggled again yesterday. Just didn't create a hell of a lot, and I think Wolves could do with perhaps more creative outlets. But as I've said, Arias and Lopez are good, so it's a tough one. I do think having a better right wing back will help Strand-Larsen a lot, and I do think Wolf and Strand-Larsen will link up a hell of a lot this season. But I do think once they get that right wing back in, someone that can put a ball on a plate and get him involved in crosses, get him involved in general play, I think that'll make a massive difference to Strand-Larsen going into next season. But for me, the first half was pretty poor, as I've said. But let's look at it with all the substitutes in the second half. Now, this was a team that Wolves ended the game with. And as I said, I don't think the subs were that bad yesterday. I thought some of the subs were relatively decent. I think some were just either poor or just didn't really make much of a difference. But I didn't think some of the players came on that bad. I thought Bellegarde was decent. He won a hell of a lot of free kicks in the time he was on. A few nice touches, as I said. Generally got the ball forward and recovered it quite well. And generally, Bellegarde, I think, was relatively just a 7 out of 10 more often than not anyway, and was quite consistently decent. For me, Bueno surprised me. That's not Hugo Bueno, that's Santiago Bueno. He really surprised me. I thought he did okay when he come on, given the fact that it's one of the worst centre-back performances I've ever seen against Girona, to be quite honest. But he actually looked okay when he came on, won a few free kicks. There was a time when it was a one-on-one with him and their number 9. It wasn't obviously their number 9, but he was, their forward, and he dealt with it really well and played it back to Sarr. And generally, I thought he was okay when he come on. Yerson Mosquera, another one for me. I think he played really well when he came on. I really do. He didn't have too much to do, but he just looks so comfortable on the ball, really, and he looks a lot more assured. Now, again, it's rough because Doherty's the one that he's going to be replacing, but Doherty's not the problem, which is a shame. But I think next season, potentially, we could see at points as well, if Agbadou's performances don't step up, we could potentially see Doherty or Mosquera as the centre back, and then either one of them as the right-sided centre back as well at points. And I would like to see that, to be honest, because Agbadou, there has been certain games where I've been questionable of him, as I've said this pre-season. Rodrigo Gomez, I want to move on to him. bit of a nothing substitution, really, wasn't it? He didn't do a hell of a lot. He looked okay down the right-hand side, to be fair, but he looked better than Herver or on the same level as Herver, really. He got a few, he got more advanced than Herver did, which was surprising because Herver was very advanced, but he got the ball in more advanced areas than Herver. Didn't do a hell of a lot with it, but again, I thought he was okay. It's pretty much a nothing substitution for me. Now, Bueno, I really liked Bueno. I have to say, Hugo Bueno, that is. I really liked him. I thought he was really good. When he picked up the ball in this area, he wanted to go on the outside of his man. There was times he'd come on the inside of his man. And generally, I could have watched, I could have actually watched him most of the afternoon, to be honest. I was quite impressed with Hugo Bueno yesterday. And I do think he obviously had that yellow card and he did get beat easily defensively. There's a time when he gets absolutely rinsed by their player. I think Ronaldo chops him, nutmegs him, goes round the keeper, and then ultimately, doesn't go in. I think it was El Abdelawi or something like that. But he should have bagged. It was a brilliant move from him. But generally, I thought Hugo Bueno was good. I thought his delivery was good. I thought his ability to get in behind was good. I thought his willingness to run was good as well. There was often times in that second half where Totti would be operating in these areas and Bueno would just go and go and go on the outside of his man, and then Totti would look to feed him either in there or in there. And there was times when that happened a hell of a lot. So I think Bueno, relatively impressed me yesterday, and I don't think you can do far worse than keeping Bueno, but equally, again, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of selling him, as I've previously said, because of PSR, but Wolves are in a tough position with the players they can afford to lose and stuff like that as well. Now, I want to speak about Marshall Monetzi. It was a really nothing substitution, wasn't it? He didn't do a hell of a lot, didn't really get on the ball, didn't really notice him that much. Manette Zidane is what me and my mates call him. That's what I called him yesterday anyway. I said Marshall Manette Zidane because he's just unbelievable. Number 5 on his back as well. Just incredible footballer. But no, in all seriousness, I don't think he was... he was neither here nor there, was he? He was okay. Didn't do a hell of a lot that you can really remember, and he was his work rate. That was all he did. Just his running, wasn't it? Really, again for Monetzi, and it feels like that is just Marshall Monetzi at the minute, doesn't it? It's just his work rate is brilliant, but everything else isn't really. Then we'll speak about Hwang. This for me was probably the most pointless substitution of all of them, given the fact that 1, he might be leaving, and 2, I couldn't tell you anything he did. And he was on my side, on the side of the Steve Bull as well, and I couldn't tell you one thing that he did in that game or contributed to that game. He didn't look particularly sharp. I don't even remember him touching the ball, actually, to be fair. But Wang, for me, it was just a pointless sub, and he didn't do a hell of a lot whatsoever. So we're just going to quickly move on to him. Finally, to the last man that I want to talk about in Sasa Kalajdzic. Now, a weird sub for me, because I think he comes on, and I think he's okay. I think when he comes on, I think he's okay. He gets the ball in good areas yesterday. There was an area he picked up the ball or won the ball back somewhat, about 25 yards from goal, and he brings it forward, but he chooses to pass. And I looked at that and I thought, that might just be a one-off. That might just be a one-off. It's not, it's not something that, he might have just genuinely thought that Joao Gomez, who he passed it to, was in a better position to shoot. Ultimately, I don't think Joao Gomez ended up shooting in the end, but he may have just felt that. But then ultimately, it happens again. He gets the ball. He's near the 18-yard box. He gets into the box, but instead of going for the shot, he takes it wide and tries to cut it back for someone instead of just hitting it. And for me, Kalajdzic feels like one of them players that, because he's been out for so long, and he is only just getting back up to fitness in pre-season, I just think his confidence is completely shot. And there was, like I say, there was 2 instances that I can think of. I think there was about 3 in total, where I just think he's got to be more of a threat. And I didn't think he looked like he wanted to shoot. He didn't particularly look impressive. When he was in those areas, he lacked conviction, I think, in his play, and generally, I don't think he was that good in those areas and that decisive. And I think his decision making was poor. But I would like to see him shoot in those areas more, because I think he genuinely probably could have tested the goalkeeper in both of them scenarios and maybe even scored, to be honest, because they weren't that ridiculous. He wasn't getting closed down particularly quickly, and he was, like I say, in the box, especially for that one, he was so comfortably clear in the box with no one near him, and he just didn't get the shot off. So I think it's an interesting one. I just wanted to tactically break it down the following day, just so we can look at it with a more clear mind, watch the game back and stuff like that, and just look at the things that I was perhaps not that as impressed with, and the things that perhaps I was impressed with. The players, for example, like I said, mainly in the first half with Fer Lopez and Matt Doherty playing really well yesterday. But let me know what you think about the game. from a tactical standpoint. If you enjoy these tactical breakdown videos, also let me know, because I love making these videos. I've got a real passion for tactics and looking at football on a deeper level. So if you do enjoy these videos, I'd really appreciate it if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, because we're on the road to 2,000 subscribers before the Premier League season starts in just how many days? 5 days. So it's very, very hard, but I'm sure we can still do it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate you watching it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.